Really? Oh, you. And here we are for a Thursday morning episode of Dualistic Unity Raw. It's a short episode. It's a Thursday episode, which means that we're just shooting from the hip, especially this morning because my house is still a fucking catastrophe. And by catastrophe, I mean it has no semblance of organization whatsoever. Everything's kind of all over the place. My bed hasn't been put together. I have a dishwasher getting delivered today, which is great. It's a portable dishwasher. If you haven't had a portable dishwasher and you're thinking to yourself, I don't have room, like I don't have room to install a dishwasher, but you'd like some additional counter space, consider a portable dishwasher. They're well worth it. And you know, they're really not that bad in terms of the resources that they use. It's about the same amount of water as I'd use doing dishes by hand, honestly, because I tend to leave the tap running. Anyway, that was our short ad for dishwashers. You can advertise on Dualistic Unity Podcast. Dishwashers, cannabis, psychedelics, doesn't matter, yoga mats, whatever you'd like to do. That was my short Thursday morning spiel. I'm going to stop talking and rambling now. I'm obviously have just woken up.
I love it, man. And that just emphasizes how there's never like a right thing to say. You know, we want to hop on here and talk about dishwashers for a little bit and then flip it into, you know, an announcement that we do advertising on the podcast, then we'll do that. And that's the beauty. It's been interesting because I've always been, I don't know, like get frustrated that I feel like I can't explain Dualistic Unity super well, but I feel like that's kind of part of it. It's part of the thing is that it's a difficult to describe or explain because there's not really a specific thing to pin it to because it's not a specific conversation even. Like it is in a sense there's things to talk about certainly, but like so much of it does come down to just a willingness to be yourself and not look to other stuff and not look to other things for like because there's not a right way. There's not a right thing to do ever. And it's like my assumption that there is just like it adds some degree of weight, but as long as I'm looking around for a right thing to do or a right way to act, like there's going to be something there. And then it causes this immediate conflict with myself and reality, and what's going on creates a lot more tension. And that was something else that's been hitting me with tension and relaxation, just how much like there are days that I go through that I feel like I am a teenager again, very much so. And the memories will be like seemingly perfectly intact. Like I'm in that experience again. And I was wondering, like, I smoked a good bit about an hour ago, and I started like just thinking about how much like, you know, if the past isn't really something that happened over a sequence of time, if there isn't like certain experiences I pin to like certain feelings or like certain layers of tension possibly, and as you relax more and more, it's like I don't know, this whole like working backwards through your layers of tension or relaxation or whatnot, like if that's a thing or if that's just a way I'm trying to make sense of it. But I feel like, and it goes hand in hand with, you know, being aware of more things. I think that those layers of tension get peeled back. Cause like I said, like there's days where I feel like I'm fucking 14 or 15 again. And it's so palpable. And so I just wonder if, you know, those memories aren't really, you know, past memories. They're just points that I attached that feeling of tension with. And it's like it's almost like when it got slapped on and then things were built from there, and then as it gets peeled off, it feels like the same sort of feeling, but now it can be from a different perspective, because instead of being, you know, tensing more and more and more, it's like you're relaxing more and more and more. And so in response to it, rather than tensing, you can relax, rather than looking for, you know, the right way to respond in response to that sort of experience. You realize there isn't so much of one, and you can relax in response to that. So Anyway,
I'd say that was really well said, actually. It's funny because you've met me in person, you've hung out with me in person, you just help me move. When I'm not doing what I need to do, I'm pretty childish as a person, aren't I? Yeah, kind of goofy, weird, don't really give a shit. Very expressive on my face. Sometimes I'm just grooving on the spot because I can. Like you were at several events where people just made assumptions about me as a person, and every time they're just like, "Wow, he's actually a little bit weird," and he's okay with his weirdness, and that's great. Why? Why am I like that? Well, because I relax, right? So the less I'm thinking about myself, the more I'm just in the moment, and the more it seems like I'm just playing. Right? So, were we playing because we were children, or were we playing because we were relaxed? We were playing because we were relaxed. So the more you relax now, the more you're playing again. But it's kind of funny. It's like it's very much like school. There were classes where you had to memorize a certain amount of things for the test, and then a certain amount of things for the test, and a certain amount of things for the test. And then after that, you had to memorize all of those things over again, or rather review them over again for the exam. And then, so there was this entire process of learning this entire thing, learning to think a certain way to a point because you had to, and then it was gone, and you stopped thinking about it that way, right? Well, the reverse is kind of also true. Like as we started investing more in control, the less we started remembering what it was like to relax, because we're like, well, why would I think about that? I don't need that. That doesn't work anymore. I can't relax anymore. I can't just be myself anymore. I can't just, act the way I want to act and live the way I want to live and be the way I want to be, because there are all these standards and rules and expectations and everything else to live up to. And so relaxation kind of becomes a mentality that just doesn't become worth remembering. It actually becomes kind of a painful memory because you can't relax, in the same way that, nap time was a painful memory to some degree because you didn't get it anymore after like, kindergarten. You remember nap time in school? I still remember nap time in school. It was the best part of school. It's how they hooked me. I shit you not. They're like, look, it's toys, it's games. You can play with kids. Look, we take a nap. Now you go home. And then the next year it was, what do you mean I can't go home? Where's the nap time? And what happened to all the games? And it got all serious from there. But that was the point, is all of a sudden you just couldn't relax. You had tests. You had to live up to other standards. You had people looking down on you. And that's society as a whole, right? So we talk about the individual need to relax, but it's also a collective, a collective relaxation, and to a very large degree. And again, like, there's a doomsday clock. That's totally and utterly symbolic. I mean, it's adjusted by world experts, but it's adjusted based on the average state of fear, more or less. Not just fear, but our actual capacity to destroy ourselves out of fear. It's a hell of a thing. I don't know if you've ever looked it up. I encourage anybody listening to check out the Doomsday Clock. It's been around since after World War II.
I've not seen that before, but it makes sense. Like, I mean, having a doomsday clock, that's gonna play into some serious tension, constantly keeping that in mind. And like, holy fucking Christ, like the underlying tension that's expressing in a sense, like I'm kind of curious about this doomsday clock now. Like, does it is it a timer? Is it like a countdown, or is it just varying? Because
It
sounds
is
like
completely symbolic. So at the moment,
oh,
currently, the Doomsday Clock is 90 seconds to midnight, because we are in a time of unprecedented danger. So you can actually go and find out what the current time is. There's a website and whatnot. But yeah, and they'll give you all the reasons and all the considerations as to why we're that close to doomsday. It's not an actual countdown. It's very much symbolic. Like, they can set it back. Like, if we did some good work, they'd be like, now it's 3 minutes to midnight, 6 p.m. That'd be great. What about noon? But no, like, midnight's like the end of the day. That's doomsday. And so yeah, no, it's all very serious. It's all very serious. But they were trying to get across a point after the invention of the nuclear bomb. we can seriously fuck shit up now. And if we don't take that seriously, we are on a rapid approach to doomsday. Not just a steady like march, but a sprint if we're not really careful. And so, yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Absolutely. I really, I thought it was fascinating when I found out about it. It's because there are people out there that are going, things are really screwed up. And then there are people out there going, yeah, but I want to get mine. What about me? There's a lot of me. I got to satisfy that me. I can't stop thinking about all this me. And it changes everything. It changes everything because it doesn't matter how clearly obvious it is that we are fucking ourselves over. It does not matter any more than it matters to an addict. I thought this was really interesting because somebody on your Instagram comment thread is going off right now about addiction is far more complicated than you're making it out to be. And you never said addiction is anything other than complicated. You never said it was simple. You said beating yourself up isn't going to fucking help you with that at all. But this person has quit smoking. And so they are experts on addiction. And they judge themselves for smoking. I guarantee if I were to ask them, like, do you think you'll ever have a cigarette again? They're, no, real as you like. That whole thing. And it's because they feel like they're victims to the cigarette. And they've even said, like, go read a book about how this chemical determines the path of human consciousness because it creates sex and love and hate and all this. And it's like, okay, true, there are chemicals in your brain. And yes, they do in fact have an influence over you. If we were to give you a bunch of new chemicals in your brain, you would experience that shit. Doesn't matter if it's serotonin or acid. Doesn't matter. You would experience that shit. Your conscious environment would change. So let's not say that chemicals have nothing to do with it. Let's just say that that does not disregard your awareness within those chemicals. See, it's always you. You're always reacting to them. So while you might go, well, yeah, but there's this chemical that makes me want to seek pleasure. That is true. And then there is an awareness that says, right, but that leads in a circle. Then it inevitably causes pain. And you have the willingness to look at that urge, stop before you go to try and satisfy it, or at least try to stop and experience something else. And then your brain goes, oh shit, there's another option. And so while it's true that the chemicals in your brain are influencing you, and while it's true, you still have to deal with that different conscious environment than I'm going through, you are still the center of that conscious environment. You still have the ability to slow down. You still have the ability to respond differently. You have the ability to learn from the experience of yourself. You do. And nobody's saying it's not difficult. Nobody's saying that you're going to do it in a black and white fashion, that it's just going from, dealing with shit to being totally happy all the time. It's a process. It's work. But isn't it worth it if it's changing the experience of yourself just through self-knowledge? That's all. Nobody's saying, again, that you can't get help, that there isn't a way for you to go through a process of change and self-acceptance and all of that. Sure, that's all part of the journey. It's not, oh, tomorrow I've woken up and I've solved all my problems. But tomorrow I've woken up and I've realized that I can, in fact, have a hand in influencing what I consider to be my problems. That I can let go of a lot of the things that cause them to be so frustrating, that cause me to despair, that cause me to feel anxious. I have that ability. I can look at the thoughts that I want to think and recognize they have a cost. It's all we're saying. And I just find it so very interesting how quickly we want to go, no, my brain is telling me I can't do it.
Yeah, because it's just passing that responsibility entirely off to something else, because there's like a comfort in thinking that there's nothing you can do about things. Like there's a comfort in thinking that like how you act is irrelevant to your experience. And recognize, we've talked about karma before in the past, but that realization that like you're just interacting with yourself. So like the ways that you act and the things that you do, and of course your responses to your environment are then going to have impact over you and your experience. And it's like we want one without the other. We want our actions to be entirely separate from our experience, so I can do whatever I want and then I can feel how I want to feel, as opposed to taking some degree of responsibility to realize, like, oh no, I have, given certain circumstances, whatever, where I'm at right now, what has happened, what I feel like is happening, like I can respond to that still differently than I historically have responded. And in that shift in response, there's some degree of a shift in experience. It doesn't necessarily change everything as soon as you do it, but like in a sense, it kind of does to a degree, like change a lot about what's going on. And even just realizing that you have the ability to do so, like it is a possibility, like it exists in potential, is huge. Because as soon as you think that it doesn't, it's like you throw in the towel and that's it. And then that weight just keeps getting heavier and heavier and heavier. And that's, where labels come in, and you call yourself a certain thing and wholeheartedly buy in to that. And because you're that thing that isn't a normal thing, or that thing that is something relative to not having so much of an idea of what you are, there's a there's a point I had to that labeling yourself then reinforces that idea of what you think you are. And obviously, and then instead of not having so much of an idea, you can no, I'm
just gonna let it trail off. That's
yeah,
fair.
we're gonna
I
let
hear
that
you.
one ride.
I'll tell you right now, though, I think one of the most freeing things in my life was recognizing that I didn't have depression. That one really caught me for a long time. I have depression. I have an anxiety problem. I have these things. Like I own them. Like these things are just things I've saddled with. You know, it's not like I'm experiencing these things. It's not that I'm focused on things that create those as side effects. It's no. This is something that I'm just saddled with as part of my life. Right? I'm depressed. No. And it's such a big difference in terms of mentality. It's such a big difference, man. And it's just because, again, and I've said it numerous times, I just wanted to think I knew who I was. Because if I could identify the problem, I can identify the solution, right? How fucking naive. Because who am I to think I can recognize the problem when I'm still running from it? Like I'm still running from the feeling of being anxious, but I'm going to solve anxiety? When is running away from it ever the solution? Ever. When is running away from the problem ever the solution? It doesn't work. It never works, right? Not for long. I mean, unless you're talking about a tiger, in which case you run fast. But when you're running away from, I don't know, having to pay your rent, you're running away from your responsibilities, you're running away from that conversation with, your partner that you don't want to have, you're running away from that conversation with your boss, you're running away from social interaction, you're running away from looking at the fact that you judge yourself, you're running away from your feelings, you run away from anxiety, you run away from depression, you run away from everything. It's like, I'm sad, oh my God, I got to fix it. Instead of just going, okay, I'm sad, and sit through it, or I'm angry and sit through it. Because isn't that a trick when you're angry? What do you want to do when you're angry? You want to fucking let someone know. You want to express that shit. You want to take it out. Like you want to have an argument. You want to get into it. You want to express the feeling. And that's where the destruction comes from. Instead of just sitting down with it and letting yourself go through all the reasons you are angry, because that's what's sitting in the background. If you're not out there fucking getting it out, it's all going through your head about why you're angry, and then you have to keep going through it and going, right, and just dealing with it and letting it go one bit at a time. Or you can keep thinking about it and letting it amp you up over and over and over again. But it's always your response to the thoughts. It's always your response to that flow that you're going through that makes it either amplify or dissipate. All right, so sit through it. Sit through it. And I know it's hard. It's difficult. I get it. Like, it's not like I don't have frustrations in my life, but I'll sit down and I'll just spin through it. And sometimes I'll pace and I'll be like, oh, what the fuck? But that's the point, is that I won't be making a phone call to tell that person what I think. I won't be sitting there venting and getting angry about why the world is such a fucking piece of shit. I won't blow it out of proportion, because that's all me doing it. And it took me forever to get that. It took me forever to get that it was me doing it. Feeling frustrated and angry is one thing, but it's kind of like holding a balloon. It's one thing to hold a balloon. It's another thing to be blowing that thing up all the time and not expecting it to pop. Right? And that's the point. Have the feeling, hold the feeling, experience the feeling. Don't inflate the feeling. Don't amplify the feeling. Don't run from the feeling. Don't project onto the feeling. Don't do anything. Just sit through it. And what you recognize at the end of it is that you are strong enough to do so. You are strong enough to sit through it, which means you're stronger than the feeling, and you're stronger than the impulses that go with that feeling. And it's surprising how much that changes your life, to know how strong you are compared to your feelings. And that's really the only lesson, right? Is that you can take it and let it pass and continue to make choices out of clarity, and continue to make choices because you want to make them, rather than because you feel some compulsion to make them based on some feeling that you're not willing to deal with.
Whew. Fucking hey, dude, that was well said. As you're saying that, like, I'm realizing how many of the ways that I act are in response. It's like the actions, be it violence in response to anger, you know, shelling up in response to nerves or anxiety. Like, any response is, it's like the experience of running from, it's like the actions are the running itself, whatever it is, sad. So I don't know, like, eat a bunch of junk food to like get immediate gratification, like, happy. And then I don't know, sometimes like try and make that more, and so go do something even crazier, or feeling good, so try and like add to that. But any of those, it's like any of the responses I've ever had, any of the things that I've ever done in response to those feelings have been the running. Like, that's all, the actions are always the running, as opposed to, like, it felt almost like just sitting down in it, being like, okay, this is something that I've called in the past based on, assumptions, but I've always run from certain feelings, and that has then impacted the ways that I act. But when I sit in it, I'm like, sitting in it is being here, and there isn't the overlaid distraction to what's happening here. Because if you're running, you're not seeing what's here. If you're feeling a feeling and you're running from that feeling, which then, isn't literally you running, but it's like, when you feel anger, it's punching someone in the face. When you feel anxious or nervous, you avoid certain things. Like, it's not those experiences, it's just the sitting in it, and you're like, oh fuck, this isn't as scary as I thought it was. But it's like looking at a monster, or thinking there's a monster in your closet, and just like not opening the door and opening it and realizing there wasn't a monster, or it wasn't what you thought, or it wasn't something that you couldn't handle or deal with. And fuck, like, I is it like every sort of familiar action that I've done, that anyone does in their life, is in some degree a response to a feeling that they've made the assumption is something they shouldn't feel, or they don't want to feel. And as you just drop that shit, like drop that assumption, or idea of what it is and whether it should or shouldn't be happening, it's almost like I felt like I was just sat down and like I was already sitting, but I felt like I had just sat down in it. And I'm like, all right, this is what I'm feeling right now, and this is what I'm feeling right now. Like I don't have to have an opinion of it. I don't have to make an assumption, which then causes me to start to run. And then the more I run, it's like the faster I start running. But as soon as I'm like, no, then I'm feeling this and I can feel this, I can sit in this and still experience everything no differently than I would if I was feeling something that is more comfortable. But then as I'm sitting here, I'm like, all right, yeah, it's not comfortable. But then as I sit into it more, it's like there isn't so much of an opinion. Like it's not as uncomfortable. It's like the running exacerbates the discomfort or amplifies the discomfort or like is the discomfort. Like no,
Like a Swedish massage. Right? Like it really is. Like if you ever go for like a deep tissue massage, it hurts so much. It hurts so much, and you're just like squealing and twitching and doing this whole thing, right? But the more you do that, the more uncomfortable it gets. And if you relax through it, eventually the muscles relax, right? And this is the whole thing: is that we run so quickly, and it's just because nobody has really talked to us about being the full spectrum. Like we look at emotions as if they are single category things. Like, I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm joyous, I'm jealous. It's like all of those are in the same pool. Like, you understand? It would be like looking at a pool of water with gasoline on top. You know how you get all those colors that are all like a spectrum? It'd be like trying to identify one of those. Oh, that's blue. It's like, from which angle? And that's the whole thing, is that our emotions are a full spectrum. It's a giant feeling. It's not that you're feeling any one of these things. You're just feeling a lot. And it's, what do you want to do with it? And it's largely based on your focus, right? Anger, despair, resent, pride, all of that. These are all responses. These are all responses to a perception of yourself. These are how you can continue to inflate and maintain the perception of yourself, whether it's tearing it down or building it up. These are all responses. And so if they're all responses to a feeling, then the alternative is to just have the feeling without making it about you at all. Right? But if I'm sad and I identify with that, then it changes sadness. It makes it a story. It makes it something I have to suffer through instead of something I am experiencing now. Right? And as soon as I hold on to it, now I have problems with sadness. And so every time it comes around, I'm like, oh God, and it just gets so much worse. And it's just for that reason. It's very much like, jumping into a pool. If you jump into a pool and it's cold and you immediately jump back out, you're never going to adjust. Right? This is what people are trying to do with the ice water thing. I think it's kind of funny, right? Because they're like, you just got to sit in it and breathe. It's like, okay, that's great, but you can do that all the time. Like you can just do that with your emotions. You don't have to be sitting in ice water to understand the value of sitting and breathing. You could just be feeling a lot right now and just breathe. Allow yourself to feel and breathe and stop making it about you. And eventually you're going to go, well, I have to get shit done regardless of how I feel. And in the act of getting shit done, you will start to feel more energy. And you will start to realize that you actually have some will in your life and that you're making choices moment to moment to moment. And that in itself is very freeing, which is where that levity comes from. It's where that lightness comes from. It's just being yourself. But how can you be yourself if you're thinking about yourself all the time? And if every time you have a feeling you start thinking about yourself, you're just buried in thoughts and assumptions about those feelings rather than actually just expressing them and being them and feeling them. Right? Which is why we all feel so fucking locked up. It's why we feel like we can't talk to people. We can't be ourselves. We can't feel things. We actually start to feel numb after a while. Why? Because we shut these things down. God, I'm feeling anger. Got to fucking rigid control. But you could feel that, accept it, understand it, and learn from it. And that could happen in moments. In moments, if you were to just allow yourself to stop resisting every time it shows up. But it's work, right? Especially when it's work every time you run from something, like, and I've said this before, hanging out with a friend, you're kind of playing, and they like reach out and they poke you, and you're like, ow. And it didn't hurt like at all, but it was completely a psychological reaction to somebody like doing that. And you don't even know why you did it, that kind of thing. It's just from the response. Oh my God, I'm going to get hit. Right. Oh my God, I'm going to get hit. And we do that every time we feel something. Oh my God, it's going to fucking pummel me. Oh my God, it's going to be forever. And depression is the worst that way. Right. To feel like you're always going to feel buried, and not understanding that telling yourself you're always going to be buried is just adding to the pile. It's a lot. It takes time. Just remember that, though. It's not going to disappear right away. It's eventually going to disappear, though, if you let it. Not disappear like it can't pop back up, but because you just stop focusing on it. You stop looking for it, and so it stops showing up at your beck and call.
Yeah, it's like the running inflates it in a lot of ways, almost like a balloon if it was powered by a treadmill. You start running, it's like the more you run, the faster you start running, the bigger that balloon gets, the bigger that experience seems. But when you're willing to just sit in it and not even make it into like a reason that you're feeling it, because it's like as soon as there's a reason that you're feeling that way, there's a reason that you've felt it in the past, and then there's a whole story that comes with that, because that's just an assumption too, like you're feeling. It's like it's like, so if we're always feeling everything, then it's almost like we'll just make an assumption about a specific thing, and then with that comes a specific feeling, and then that causes us to believe that we're feeling a specific thing, which then brings my whole story into play. I'm getting something went wrong. Try reloading the page. I think I'm still coming through fine.
You are
But
coming through fine.
okay. Yeah. And so it's like, ah, man, how much that story immediately factors in when I make an assumption about a specific thing that I'm feeling. And it's like, if everyone is feeling everything all the time, then how much is my experience just dictated based on, you know, how seriously I'm taking myself relatively to everything else, how seriously I'm taking an assumption, like a baseline assumption that I'm making, and then it's like assumptions get added to a baseline assumption. Like, I don't know, the assumption that something that's happening is wrong, like the experience that I'm having is wrong, like the assumption that I'm separate from something else. But then that plays into how we respond to things and what we do, and then our response to things then impact what we do. And so, like, I don't know, like it's almost like everyone's behavior is symbolic in a sense to how they're responding to a certain feeling. And like you can see, almost like, I'm curious, maybe at some point, who knows, maybe this will be a project we could do sometime, like, degrees of tension or relaxation based on certain experiences people have, or actions people take on like a spectrum. And it would need to be like a measured thing, like, Hawkins scale, and then it could get fucked up anyway. So maybe it's not even worth looking into, but like certain ways of living and like actions taken are in response to just like my assumption about a thing based on the notion that I'm separate from stuff, and then the actions, it's sort of a vicious cycle or constant cycle of like action, response, belief, assumption, action, response, and then it's just becomes this perpetuated cycle that we're on as a collective, kind of going through, and taking responsibility is a way to like hop out of the cycle, like not assuming that something is happening because of something else, whether it's another person or another experience than the experience that you're having right now. Because then that plays in, then it's like, oh, it's on that, then it's not my response to this. And then that continues on the cycle.
See, it's interesting because we've come along to another perspective of something that we've been saying this whole time, which is of course that when you let go and you stop thinking about yourself and being in control, that you are intelligence in motion. That in fact, you're always on the ball, regardless of the experience of not being on the ball. That in fact, you're always intelligence playing out, regardless of how much you kick and scream through the feeling of being intelligence playing out. But that's really what we're doing. Is we're going through it and we're like, I don't understand this, and we're resisting it, we're thinking about it, we're making it about us, we're trying to establish control and thinking that we're going to make it better. But one way or another, we're going through the stream. We're going through it. It's just how hard we're making it on ourselves. And that's not just you individually, that's us collectively, because we're not just the thing we think we are. Right? And this is a big lesson. It's a big thing. It's a change in the way that we think as a species. Because right now we really do think of ourselves as a species. And while that is an important way to look at this, it's also really important to understand that a species of what? It's not a species of humanity, but a species of life. We are a variation of the observer. We are a variation of awareness itself expressed in this form. We just tend to take it for granted. This is why we have this ridiculous idea that humans are the pinnacle of intelligence. It's like humans aren't separate from everything else. Don't you find that? I find that fucking hilarious. I find it really funny that we don't recognize, regardless of how many resources like it takes from the entire Earth to make all of our current society possible, that it's not the entire Earth making this shit happen. We are nature. And yet, once again, we're looking at what we're doing and we're going, yeah, but it's destructive. I don't like what's happening here. I can't control all these people. I even have to make laws and whatnot to fix this mentality. It's like, that's the mentality. That's the problem. Right? And so it's way, way more complicated than we want it to be, but it's playing out. Because just like in our individual lives, we learn through consequence. We don't learn through somebody coming over and saying there's got to be consequence. We learn through consequence. Well, if that's true individually, then it's true in terms of the collective as well. And right now we're going through a process that very much resembles a caterpillar eating itself to death. But that's not the end of the caterpillar. Yet we're so quick to make the assumption that this is the end of us, to the point of having a doomsday clock.
Oh man, and like, because that was a early shift, like when I first tried mushrooms, that I very much had throughout my life, was that it's humans and then it's nature. It's like humans and then it's everything else. And that was, grew up Catholic, went to school, things like that very much reinforce that perspective that humans, are made in the image of God, and everything else isn't really, kind of, but not really, not in the same ways as humans. And so it's like a human worshiping fucking practice. Like so many religions are that. It's like egotistical worshiping, human worshiping, and just perpetuating that idea that like we're not a variation of nature. Like we're not, dolphins are mammals, humans are mammals. Like we're both mammals. Like we have this thing that like humans are a different breed of stuff. It's like we're pretty much close, and in a lot of ways dolphins are more intelligent than us. But like that's as equatable as a bush and a tree, just to generalize, but like we have this perspective that we're somehow like separate from, not only separate from reality, but as humans we're separate. And so it makes sense then that the species, or whatever you want to call humans, with the assumption based on being able to think that I'm separate from everything, I'm going to assume this race that I identify with is separate from everything as well. And it's like another variation because it's just humans and then it's everything else. It's not like it's humans and then it's another category and then it's everything else. I mean, we kind of do that with like plants and animals and whatnot, but for the most part, it's humans versus everything else. And so we're at conflict with everything else. And then like the what you were saying with the doomsday clock at the end there, like I was looking at that before, like looking through, the scrolling through the times over the years, and like that thing has not been at under 100 seconds like ever. And you can see sort of this process of, like like you said, like caterpillar turn into a butterfly, but like we're getting damn close to that clock being up. And as much as someone could look at that and be like, oh, haha, whatever, it's like it's pretty damn symbolic. And there's like a bunch of people looking at that like, yes, something is happening. And like we've talked about with apocalypse, apocalypse being in reference to a lifting of the veil. And so how much is that just a countdown to that? And like, this conversation being a thing, whatever this is, whatever the fuck this word stuff is expressing is, kind of reflective of that happening or changing. And just as a collective, everyone relaxing a little bit more, certain things in the world, the gaps between certain things, it's like we're stretching ourselves so thin that I don't know, eventually it's going to be almost a necessity, and who knows how it'll play out. But
I was just thinking to myself, could you imagine being the caterpillar and thinking to yourself, I'm going to die. I'm gonna die. Oh, and you wouldn't even know, and that's very much the point, because that's how it feels at numerous points in our life, doesn't it? Like the end of our childhood, quote unquote, when we go out into the world, we're responsible for ourselves. We're like, oh my god, I don't know if I can make it. The first heartbreak in a relationships. Oh my god, I don't know if I can make it. We lose somebody we love. Oh my god, I don't know if I can make it. And every time, we have the capacity to grow, expand, feel more, gain context, gain awareness, gain empathy, right? Each and every time. And each and every time, it's a difficult transition. This is why I'm always not amazed by, because that's long since passed, but blown away by the experience of birth. Because, man, you are super comfy in that place for like 9 months. You had nothing going on whatsoever. You talk about chill. You were super chill. And then all of a sudden, your whole skull has to get compressed down to a quarter of its width. Like it just gets squished, dude. Your brain gets squished. Your whole fucking face gets squished, and you go out the birth canal. You imagine a scarier compression period? And yet you did that to get here. And it's the same process again and again and again. And each time we have a new experience of more light, more sound, more feeling, more life. And that's why, every beginning is the birth of something new. When you look at it that way, then you're in a constant process of change, because you're never holding on to who you think you should be. You're always being who you are. This has been a hell of a fun episode. We're going to end here. We have a Patreon call coming in 15 minutes. My dishwasher's on the way. Thank you, everyone, for joining us again. Mobile dishwashers, portable dishwashers, totally worthwhile. Andrew, man, this has been fun.
it has been a blast, dude. I'm excited for the rest of our calls today and a Being High episode later.